Fugitoid by Mirage Comics. So this is actually a spin-off of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it's about Fugitoid, Professor Honeycutt, and it's his origin story. And this actually takes place between issue number 4 and issue number 5. You don't need to read it, but it does give like a good detailed backstory of Honeycutt, how he came to be, and how he ends up where he does when issue number 5 starts. But issue number 5 does a really good job of catching you up anyways. So yeah, you don't really need to read this, but I'm going to do it anyways. So as I said before, we have the origin story of Professor Honeycutt, and we start off with him as a human, and he's working on an experiment. And basically there's this General Blancu. I can't pronounce the name for the life of me. I'm just going to call him General Blanc. General Blanc wants the professor to create this transmat system. Basically, it's the system that the Utroms were creating on Earth that sent the turtles into another planet. All this will make sense when I do the review for issue number 5. But basically, in the last issue, the turtles broke in to try to save... They broke into TCRI to try to save Master Splinter. They found that inside TCRI are actually these aliens called Utroms, and they live inside these... Like, they have these robotic bodies that look like humans, and that's how they get around without being discovered as aliens. And in the last issue, they end up... the turtles end up getting... put through a trans mat, and they get teleported somewhere. And here we have Professor Honeycutt, and he's working for the Federation General Blanc, and the general wants him to create a transmat of his own. And Honeycutt doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want any of his inventions to be used as weapons. So he's been doing everything he can to kind of slow the progress. So far, General has been paying Honeycutt to create this transmat for 2 years and hasn't showed any results. That's because Honeycutt has instead been using his time and effort to try to build this mental wave. It's this device that will basically allow him to move physical objects by the force of his own mind. And so he tests it out, and it actually works. But before he can do more with it, his robot Sal requires assistance. And Sal is basically a worker robot. It doesn't really have too much of a mind of its own. It just kind of works around doing... in this issue, it does gardening. And in this case, it has dug up a bunch of wires, which has wrapped around its legs and kind of trapped it. So it calls Honeycutt for help, and Honeycutt arrives, pulls Saul out, and he's about to take Saul back home when there's a rainstorm and he gets hit by lightning. And then in chapter 2, we see a figure dragging themselves to the lab, and it turns out that it's Honeycutt, now in the body of Sal. So Honeycutt is now a robot, and his human body has been burnt to a crisp thanks to the lightning. So he's stuck in this robot body, and before he can do anything more, the general shows up with his troops, because the general had an appointment with Honeycutt to go over the transmat, like what he has so far. And they find Honeycutt's burnt body, and they believe that, rather than getting struck by lightning, they believe that he was blasted. And they see Honeycutt in Sal's body, and they think, oh, the robot went rogue and killed the professor. So they try to destroy Honeycutt, but he's able to make his escape by running off into the woods. And as he's in the woods, the general is going through Honeycutt's laboratory, and he discovers a recording of Honeycutt just before the general showed up. And in the recording, he realizes that Honeycutt is actually in the body of Sal. And he thinks, wow, this is even better than I was hoping for, because now I can capture the professor and I can force him to create all the weapons that I want him to create for me. And no one can do anything about it because a robot has no rights. And since Honeycutt is now in the body of a robot, his rights are gone. So he can be basically a slave. Meanwhile, we cut to Honeycutt, who in the woods discovers these giant, like, lobster-looking creatures. They kind of look like lobsters with like turd shells. Like when I saw their shells, it looks like a bunch of piles of turds. So anyways, the creatures actually end up to be good guys, because they actually hide Honeycutt under one of their shells, and the guards kind of walk by and they don't see anything, so they leave. And the lobster creatures basically say, hey, like you shouldn't be hiding here because the general can come back and stuff. You should go into the city of P Block. I hope I pronounced that right. Can hide you. Along the way, you're gonna come across like a junkyard, and you should use that because the general won't be able to scan you for like metal parts, because if you're in the junkyard, it's just gonna assume that you're part of the rest of the metal junk that's there. So that's a good cover for you to get into the city. So Honeycutt decides to do that when he gets accosted by some junkyard thugs, and they capture him. Meanwhile, the general is talking to his assistant, his aide, Lone, I think that's how you pronounce her name, and he basically fills her in on his plan of capturing Honeycutt, who's inside the body of this robot. Meanwhile, Honeycutt is being taken to, along with a bunch of other robots to basically like a slave auction, and he's being auctioned off, and this one human buys him. Meanwhile, we cut to Lone, who is in this bad part of the city, and she goes inside this building, and there's the Triceratons, who are at war with General Blanc. And it turns out that Lone is actually addicted to drugs, specifically this type of drug that the Triceratons have created. And she's willing to hand over information that General Blanc has given her in return for getting her next fix. So yeah, we get more proof that the original comics were a lot darker and stuff, especially because it turns out that Lorraine ends up overdosing on purpose. The Triceratons have basically given her a lethal dose because they don't want anyone else to know about the professor and his idea for this transmat. So yeah, they give her, once they get the information out of her, they give her a lethal dosage, and she dies from an overdose. And I was like, oh, damn. Not only that, but then there's this other creature that they end up vaporizing. I believe he's the one that helped make some of the drugs. I don't know exactly what he is, but they murder him too because they don't want any witnesses. Meanwhile, back with Honeycutt, he's able to escape from his human owner, and he's running through the city when General Blanc's men show up and they corner him in an alley. And before they can grab him, there's a flash of light and the Ninja Turtles appear. And this is a setup for issue number 5. So yeah, there we go. There's Fugitoid. I thought this was pretty good. Like, this is one of those issues that if you didn't have the Turtles appear at the end, this could be its own completely new IP. Like, you can just have the adventures of Honeycutt and him trying to escape from the Triceratons as well as the General Blanc. And yeah, that could be its own little story. I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, so artwork is great as always. Writing is cool. I love this little adventure. I knew a little bit about Honeycutt, but really not that much, because I've always kind of read him, not necessarily in passing, but he's mostly like the stuff I've read with him has been like cameos. And like, for example, the Ronin series, The Last Ronin, Honeycutt appears in the flashback where Leo and Casey Jones dies. But I never like really knew too much about him. But yeah, so it was kind of cool to go back and actually read his origin story and find out that just like who he was and how he came to be inside this robot body and how the Turtles discovered him and stuff like that. So yeah, there you go. There's Fugitoid. This came out in 1985. That was a year before I was born. So yeah, here we go. This, again, like I said, takes place between issues number 4 and 5, and this sets up issue number 5. But again, you can skip this altogether. This is just more like if you want more of a backstory on Fugitoid. But Fugitoid kind of does a good job of explaining his origin in issue number 5 when he's explaining it to the Turtles. So you can skip this entirely. However, if you can get your hands on this, I recommend it just because, I mean, it was a fun issue. I enjoyed it. Yeah, hope you enjoyed. Tell me what you think, and I hope to see you next time. Later. So what'd you guys think of that video? I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys haven't already, please subscribe, hit that bell for a notification, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And if you didn't enjoy the video, thank you for watching it this far, and I hope the next video is more to your liking. Feel free to check out the playlist that you guys see, and I hope to see you guys next time. Later.